Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. You know, where I'm at right now, this is right just down at the lower end of Main Street and well within the town of Columbia. But this whole area was mined. This is part of the area that they mined by hand. If you look at this, you can see some of the old quartz veins that they uncovered that started the quartz mining in the area, and you can see the limestone, the bedrock, and you can see how that the bedrock of that old ancient tertiary stream was weathered, and it was pushed up from, you know, the Sierra Nevada mountains are fairly new mountains in geological time, and so when they were formed, they pushed up massive old ancient river beds, and they pushed them up, like I say, this is way above the current rivers that run, because those rivers that run, the South Fork and the Stanislaus and the Tuolumne River on that side, they have dug deep gorges, but they left on top of this hill this massive deposit of rich Alfredos gravel within this limestone bedrock. And so the miners come up and they work this, but their problem was, because of the elevation that it's at, is having water to work it. And that's why that they went to all of the work to bring in. But consider 20 million ounces of gold, 20 million ounces of gold, $100 million in those days or more. Was a tremendous wealth that was brought out by these old miners in just a small, basically a small area. There are other outcroppings of this over by Murphy's. There are other areas where it was pushed up. Then there are areas where the new rivers cut channels through it and reconcentrated, because they brought gold out of their veins themselves. Because see, if you take that this was a mountain, and as this weathers down, any veins of material in there will eventually be weathered out, and the gold that winds up down in the gravel is placer gold. And the gold that wound up here was placer gold weathered out of veins when the earth was billions of years younger than it is today, and that wound up in this old river channel, and then it was thrust up here during the tertiary geological age. Their new rivers come along and they cut their own gorges and weathered out their own veins and brought gold into the streams. And some of the tremendously rich placer gravels in California is where the new river went through one of these old channels, and it was cutting its own new gold as well. So there you have 2 or 3 different types of gold within the same river channel, and you have a reconcentration, and just a extremely rich thing. But this is part of the area. Now this area covers a couple of square miles in here where the miners went in and they worked this, and where they found that they could, when the gravel was up here, they would wash it down with hydraulic nozzles when they got the water, but the water was very expensive. So mining was a very expensive enterprise, even hand mining. But when they got into working it with giants and monitors and stackers and all of that kind of stuff with the hydraulic mining. The hydraulic mining has, it's got a bad name with any kind of mining today. It's got a bad name with the environmentalists that are out there. But let me put it to you again, and if you can't grow it, you got to mine it. And the hydraulic mining really didn't do that much destruction. They washed down some gravel, that washed down into the streams, caused some sediment for a short period of time, but they weren't adding any chemicals to it, and it was just natural material. It was tantamount of a flood. You know, if you have a good flood, sometimes that'll wash more material and silt into the river than will man is pretty infinitesimal compared to a flood. If you consider the awful flood we had in the Mississippi Delta this last year, the amount of material that went down that probably amounts to 1 million to 10 million times as much dirt as has ever been mined by all the miners in the world, and that's including the commercial operations. And when you compare a guy with a pick and shovel to that, it's just like comparing an ant to an elephant. And so it's quite a thing. But it's popular to blame somebody for the ills of the environment. Our ancestors created some pollution, certainly. They created a lot of wealth, and they created an awful good lifestyle for us. You know, if you don't think that you have a good lifestyle, get out of your air-conditioned house and out of your automobile, start walking and fighting mosquitoes and bugs, because nature's still out there. And in order to appreciate the things that we have, sometimes we have to get back and do a little honest hard work and get out in Mother Nature and prowl around a little bit, and then that'll really make you appreciate the things. So certainly we live the computers and everything that we have, that collective amount of knowledge, the Industrial Revolution, all of that, we live somewhat on the back of our ancestors, and they left us a great legacy. But they also left us a legacy of some pollution that needs to be cleaned up, and we shouldn't whine and cry about that. We should just get about the job of it. But they didn't leave us near as much as a lot of people are creating today by just throwing their trash out. It amazes me that one can call himself an environmentalist and throw trash out the window of his car. Or he's certainly not going to get out of his car and do any walking, and he burns up a lot of fossil fuel, and then he wants to shut down the people that are out there mining for him. Sooner or later, that's all going to come back and bite us right in the rear end, ladies and gentlemen. The 1872 mining laws gives you a right of access to public land. That's a really precious thing. I know that maybe if you live in the city, that doesn't mean a whole lot to you, that you get the idea that everything should be in a national park. But when you lock it up in a national park, you can no longer mine it, you can no longer cut timber off of it, you can no longer graze cattle on it, and you have to go hire a bunch of park rangers to manage it. And then you have to stand in line because there's only certain parts of it that'll be accessible to you, and so you have to stand in line and wait 6 months for a reservation to go there and see it. 2/3 of the 11 western states is public land, and that's a great issue with a lot of people. How we manage those lands, multiple use, is something that I personally believe in. Not all members do, but I do. I consider myself an environmentalist. We go out and we clean up. I've gone out and on some of the claims that GPAA has, gold is only found in certain areas. It's not found everywhere. It's just found in certain areas. And those areas where that you find gold in workable quantities, where an individual can go out with a pick and shovel in an area that's accessible to him, those are very precious areas. Our access to those, our free access to those areas are very precious. And yet you go out, sometimes you find that they've dumped bed springs and old tires and all kinds of stuff out on public land, and we get together in groups and meet down there, and we clean up this stuff and haul it off to the landfill. I think some of this is probably caused by people not having the money or not wanting to spend the money that it costs to take your stuff to the landfill today, because that's getting more and more expensive all the time. So they just throw it out on the thing, and then they go join some wacko environmental group and they want somebody else to clean it up. But if you help clean that stuff up yourself, you're a good citizen, and it helps Mother Nature. And it's always nice to go out there and find things that are pretty clean and leave it the way that you found it or better.